Our movie today begins with Tess, who moves into a new house in a different place far from her hometown due to her job. She rented this house through a mobile app. Tess arrives at the address in her car, and it's dark outside. She tries to enter the passcode to unlock the door and get the key, but she can't find it. She tries to contact the app she used to rent the house, but the number is unavailable. After a while, she notices that a window in the house lights up, so she runs to the door and knocks hard to find out who's inside. A man named Keith opens the door and asks her what she wants. Tess tells him that this house is hers and that she rented it. Keith responds that he also rented the house from the same company. After checking the app, they discover there's a system issue. Keith invites her inside to rest while they figure out how to solve the problem. Tess enters, and Keith tries to make her comfortable by preparing some food and offering her a drink, and they sit down to talk. Keith suggests that Tess spend the night in the house until the next day, but she refuses, saying she'll stay in her car until she finds a hotel. Keith tells her that if he were in her place, there's no way he would go out at that time and sleep in the car. He also mentions that the neighborhood looks pretty scary during the day. Tess starts to feel uneasy and decides to stay in the house until she finds a hotel. Tess decides to sleep on the couch, but Keith refuses and insists that she take the bed. Tess goes up to the room and sleeps in the bed while Keith sleeps on the couch. But suddenly, in the middle of the night, Tess wakes up to the sound of her bedroom door opening. She gets up quickly but doesn't find anyone. Then, she hears Keith groaning, and she assumes it was just a nightmare, so she goes to wake him up. Keith wakes up shocked, scared, and very confused. Tess apologizes and heads back to her room immediately. The next morning, Tess wakes up and finds that Keith is gone, but he left a note apologizing for leaving early. He also apologizes for what happened last night and mentions that he won't be able to meet her today. Tess leaves the house, locks the door, and goes to work, where she meets an author who is very impressed with her and agrees to work with her. The author asks Tess where she lives, and Tess tells her she's staying in a neighborhood in Baltimore. The author warns her that it's not a safe place to live and advises her to leave quickly, but Tess doesn't take her warning seriously and says she's comfortable in the house and even has a housemate. After work, Tess drives back to the neighborhood and notices that all the houses are abandoned and that no one lives there except her and Keith. When she arrives at her house, she realizes just how terrifying the neighborhood looks. Her fear grows even more when she sees a strange man running toward her, yelling for her not to go inside the house. Tess panics and rushes to the house, grabs the key, and locks the door behind her. The strange man keeps banging on the door, shouting at her to leave the house until he finally goes away. Afterward, she calls the police, but they tell her no one is available to come to the house at the moment. This makes Tess even more anxious, and she tries to calm herself down. She goes to the bathroom but can't find any toilet paper. She searches the house for some and eventually ends up at the basement door. She finds plenty of toilet paper there and goes to grab some, but when she tries to leave, the door closes, trapping her inside because it only opens from the outside. Tess realizes she left her phone in the living room, and she has the house key in her pocket, but she knows she can't unlock the door from inside. She's forced to wait for someone to come and help her. Suddenly, she notices a rope sticking out of the wall, and when she pulls it, a secret door in the basement opens. Curiosity gets the better of her, and she decides to explore what's behind the door. She grabs a mirror to use as a flashlight and stumbles upon a closed room with a bed, a camera, and a bucket. That's when she realizes something strange has been going on in this basement, and she rushes out. When she sees Keith coming back from outside, she bangs on the window to get his attention. He takes the key from her, enters the house, and unlocks the door for her. Tess is still terrified from what she saw in the basement, and starts hysterically telling Keith everything. However, Keith doesn't believe her and asks her to calm down. He decides to go into the basement himself to check out the room. While Tess waits nervously, she hears Keith calling for her from inside, sounding frightened by something. She tries to gather her courage and goes down to check on him. She searches for Keith in the basement, but doesn't find him in the room. Suddenly, she sees another door leading to a different room. When she opens it, she finds a staircase leading to a dark hallway. Using her phone's flashlight, she calls out for Keith. Out of nowhere, Keith appears, terrified, telling her that a scary-looking woman had bitten him on the arm. At that moment, the terrifying woman appears, and Tess is so shocked that she can't move. Suddenly, the woman attacks Keith, slamming his head against the wall until he dies. After a while, in another place, we see Jack, who works in TV production, driving his car, happy and singing. Suddenly, he gets a call from the company's lawyer, who tells him that he's been accused of harassment by the show's anchor, and that the company has fired him, leaving him jobless. The bigger problem is that the anchor has made the incident public, and the story is set to be published in the newspapers with tomorrow's edition. Jack panics and heads to his lawyer to find a solution to this mess. However, he's shocked when the lawyer informs him that he has lost his job and doesn't have enough money to hire a lawyer. The only option is to sell his house so he can afford legal representation. The lawyer also tells him that he could file a defamation case against the anchor, but won't be able to continue with him as he can't afford the fees. Jack leaves feeling sad, like everyone has abandoned him, even the anchor he personally recommended is now suing him. Afterward, Jack decides to travel and goes to the rental company to get the key to the house, which happens to be the same house Keith and Tess were in. He takes the key and moves in, but when he enters, he finds the door open, so he closes it. Jack then walks around the house, noticing a lot of personal items and suitcases scattered everywhere. He's confused, seeing other people's belongings in the house. He searches every corner, calling out for anyone who might be there, but finds no one. Jack decides to go out with his friend from the same city, and they head to a bar. There, his friend asks him if the news about him is true, whether he really assaulted the anchor or not. Jack responds that they had a romantic relationship, and while she was initially reluctant, the relationship eventually happened. He explains that he didn't realize she would consider it assault. Jack drinks heavily until he gets completely drunk, then returns home, totally out of it, and falls asleep. The next day, he wakes up as if nothing had happened the night before. He opens Tessa's suitcase and goes through everything inside until he finds her laptop. When he turns it on, he learns her name. Jack then decides to go down to the basement to check it out. He grabs a knife and a flashlight, heading down until he reaches the wall with the rope. When Jack pulls the rope, the door opens, and he gets really scared, running back upstairs into the house. After that, he asks, "Is the basement counted in the house's total area or not?" He learns that it is counted, so he decides to go down and measure the basement to find out the total area for selling the house. He goes down and starts measuring the basement and opening its various doors, to the point where he doesn't even notice the iron cages he encounters, which are filled with blood. He continues until he enters a room with a TV showing a baby feeding program. Jack is surprised to see a TV here, and it's even on. Suddenly, he hears someone coming from a distance, and he becomes very scared. He pulls out his knife, but it drops from his hand due to the intense tension. He quickly retrieves the knife and turns on his flashlight, only to find the same disfigured woman who killed Kath. Jack is even more terrified and quickly runs in the opposite direction, only to fall into a hole in the ground, which then closes on him. At this moment, Tess appears and tells him to calm down and not to be nervous with this woman around. The terrifying woman comes in with a bottle of milk, treating Tess as if she were her own child, and starts feeding her from the bottle. Tess drinks, but when it's Jack's turn, he refuses to drink. The woman becomes angry, takes the bottle from him by force, and leaves the cage open. Tess quickly escapes from the cage and begins to follow them quietly. Jack and the monstrous woman reach the room with the TV, which is still only showing the feeding program. The woman lays Jack on the floor and tries to feed him herself. Meanwhile, Tess tries to escape quietly so as not to be heard by the woman, but she makes noise and bumps into a meter as she runs. The woman hears the noise and runs after her, but Tess escapes quickly until she reaches a glass window and breaks it. At the last moment, the mysterious person who warned her about the house arrives and helps her escape. This person is the same one who told her about the woman who has been living in the house for a long time. He tells her she needs to get out of the area as quickly as possible. Tess tells him that someone is trapped inside and needs to be rescued, but the man insists she must save herself first, as the monstrous woman won't let anyone leave the house. Tess heeds his advice and rushes to the road until she reaches a gas station, where she calls the police for help. When the police arrive, they don't believe her story because they know the area has been abandoned for a long time, and no one dares to live there. Tess returns to the house after breaking the glass, takes the car key, and exits quickly. However, she suddenly finds the monstrous woman standing in front of her, so she runs her over with the car and then goes back into the house to rescue Jack. At this time, Jack hears a voice asking for help, so he walks through the corridors until he reaches a room with an elderly man named Frank. Frank is lying in bed and looks frightening. Frank points to his desk, and when Jack approaches, the man pulls out a gun. Jack thinks Frank is going to kill him, but he is shocked when Frank aims the gun at himself and commits suicide. Jack grabs the gun and shines the flashlight on the desk, where he sees many videotapes with girls' names written on them. Jack plays one of the tapes and sees Frank assaulting the girl on the tape. Jack realizes that this man was abducting and assaulting girls. Jack is very frightened and quickly leaves the room with the gun. He hears someone coming from outside, shoots, and discovers it's Tess. He grabs her and runs outside. When they get out, Tess finds that the monstrous woman isn't in the car, so she tells Jack to hurry and escape the place. They meet the mysterious man outside the house, who takes them to his hiding place where he's been living all his life. Jack is determined to take Tess to the hospital because he feels responsible for what happened to her. But the mysterious man tells them that the monstrous woman will come at night, and they must wait until morning. When they ask him about the woman, he tells them she has been living in the house for 40 years. He also reveals that she is one of the children that Frank used to abduct and abuse, forcing them to have more children. At that moment, the monstrous woman appears behind the man, grabs his head, and pulls off his arm. Jack and Tess immediately flee, but Tess is injured and unable to run quickly. In the end, they reach a dead end and suddenly find a ladder. They climb it to the top but find no escape, and the monstrous woman is right behind them. Tess remembers the gun Jack has, but in her panic, the gun falls to the street. Suddenly, Jack grabs Tess and throws her over the edge. The monstrous woman runs and leaps after her. When Jack descends, he finds the woman has saved Tess from death with her own body. Jack sees that Tess is still breathing and quickly carries her, apologizing for what he did. But suddenly, the monstrous woman rises and kills Jack. She then sits next to Tess, treating her as if she were her own daughter. Tess realizes that the woman will never let her go, and will keep her trapped forever. Tess notices Jack's gun nearby, takes it, and finally kills the monstrous woman. She escapes from the house and survives, living a better life despite everything that happened to her. Unlike Jack, who was selfish and chose to sacrifice her for his own sake. And that's how our movie ends today. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video.